who helped. But before we get into the program, we do have one bit of NJ Lera business to do, and that is our bylaws ask our nominating committee to give a report. And this is one of the meetings that they can give the report. And so with this, I'm turning it over to Bill Dwyer to give us a nomination committee report. Bill?
Hi, everyone. Bill Dwyer here, chair of the nominations committee. So quick update. All 4 of our officers have opted to remain in their current roles for another year. So we have stability at the top, so to speak. And all of our board members have also been polled. They've also chosen to stay in their current positions for another year, with one exception. And the committee will discuss and solicit possible candidates to fill that vacancy before our March program meeting, at which time we'll confer with everyone to announce the slate of candidates and to have our election before the end of the semester, of the end of the year. That's our update. Back to Lucille.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bill. And Jonathan was part of that committee. Thank you. I would like now to begin our program. Our program, as I gave the introduction, is timely. We have our co-moderators, Dean Burrell, David Leach. Dean, who has worked in this field for a very, very long time and now is an arbitrator mediator. And David speaks for himself with his presence. He is our Mr. NRB representative, now Professor Leach, teaching what he did. So I am going to turn the program over to them. And gentlemen, you'll introduce our speakers. Yes.
Excellent. As Lucille said, I'm Dean Burrell. I am on the board of Lera. It is my pleasure to be here as a, I guess David should call an NLRB alumnus and a neutral. I am fascinated by what's been taking place at Starbucks and Amazon. We have seen an unprecedented amount of union organizing, which is an interesting juxtaposition as the overall union participation goes down. So for those of you who believe in unionism, there is hope. For those of you who may be on the other side, there'll be plenty of work. So this has never been a better time to do what we do. We have 3 speakers tonight who are outstanding. I'm going to ask that each one of them, Niah Baker from Starbucks, who I believe is the lead organizer, which is a rare treat for us. We also have Christine Gallo from Cohen Weiss, and Jen Roselle from Genova Burns. So I'm going to ask each one of them to give a short introduction about themselves, starting with Niah, then Christine, and then Jen, and then I'll turn it over to David to get this started right. So Niah.
Hi, I'm Niah Baker. I am one of the organizers at the Montclair Church Street Starbucks. We are the 4th unionized Starbucks in New Jersey. I come from a union family, and it's just organizing is just something that I find it has to be done, especially considering the state that we are in this post-COVID world.
Excellent. Christine, if you could give us a short overview of yourself.
Sure. Christina Gallo. I'm a partner at Cohen, Weiss, and Simon. I have spent my career to date in union side labor and employee benefits firms. And right now I do both labor and employee benefits work. I have been working in the labor movement since before law school. I actually started out as a researcher and strategic campaigner for the Union Unite, which then became Unite Here, which is now Workers United, which is goes without any more introduction necessary as to the full circle that I have traveled.
Excellent. And Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Roselle. I am a partner at Genova Burns. My background is management side labor, HR work. I've worked on both the public and the private side, dealing with organizations and collective bargaining, grievances, arbitrations. So I've kind of seen both sides of the table from public and private, but I've been on the management side for most of my career.
Excellent. And one housekeeping item, which is if you could send us your questions. We do have the chat feature available. Also, we'll be taking questions at the end. David?
Yes, thanks, Dean, and thanks to Niah and Christina and Jennifer for joining us and putting together this panel. I have to admit at the beginning of this that after 45 years with the National Labor Relations Board and being on the panel with Dean to do the annual NLRB program for New Jersey Lera, we have had a list of NLRB stars. 19 program, we had Chairman John Ring from the Trump administration who spoke. In the following year, we had Lauren McFerrin, who at that point, since the election had just been conducted, we all assumed would be the next chairman of the NLRB, and that in fact was the case. And then last year, we had Win Wilcox, a New York lawyer, someone I had supervised in the New York region, and a dear friend who came to speak for us. And this year I figured we would do that again. We'd have another NLRB program. And I have to admit, I was just about shouted down at the executive board meeting, and everyone says, come on, you know what's happening? There's a revolution in NLRB cases and in organizing. And so Dean and I, were charged with coming up with a program that would really be timely in terms of what is happening. Just a few statistics before we start. The Bureau of Labor Statistics just came out last week, and there are 16 million workers in the United States in the year 2022. That was an increase of 273,000 from 2021. Sounds fantastic, but more non-union jobs were created, and there was a drop from 6.2% union membership in the private sector to 6%. So there's been a drop. But interestingly, the National Labor Relations Board reports that the number of cases after years of stable funding or level funding, and with a case drop at the NLRB, we were, I was impressed to see the increases. Now 53% more representation cases at the National Labor Relations Board because of the efforts of Niah and others like him who are out there organizing workers. I was particularly interested in the Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers that it was in the food service industry that was one of the least unionized areas. So what Niah and his colleagues and his co-workers have done is truly remarkable. So there's a 53% increase in board elections last year. There's also a 24% increase in unfair labor practice charges that have come to the board. What's happening at the board? They had to go back to Congress and beg for more money because the level funding that they had gotten was just not enough. And so it's in this context of more cases, more elections that we've seen what's been happening. It's also interesting that NLRB case intake says that the 23% increase in C cases is the largest since 1976. Now, I worked for the board from 1976 until 2021. That means during my entire career, case numbers dropped. Whether that's cause and effect, my hire by the board or not, I don't know, but it may possibly It may possibly be. But it's interesting that in 24% of NLRB cases in which a petition for an election has been filed, there is a 24% of those elections, there's been an unfair labor practice alleging discharges of employees. And with respect to coercion, threats, retaliations, unfair labor practice charges, that's up 27% of cases where there's an election filed, where there's some evidence of retaliation. So the board's busy. Whether the board has the number of employees to handle it, I don't know. But without me, rambling on anymore, it's really my honor to pass the baton to a young man that I just met last week. When we had a preliminary meeting, who struck me as being incredible in terms of his passion, his skill, his desire to make a difference. And so I pass it off to Niah Baker. Thank you for being with us, Niah.
Are you there?
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. So my sort of plan on, like, I guess the best way I could do or explain like my store is kind of give you the timeline of how I came into Starbucks and how I got here. So around in the summer of 2021, towards the end of COVID, I had decided that my previous job was just not for me. It was under investigation by the Department of Labor for missing hours on people's paychecks. And I was like, I'm not going to deal with this. Like, my management obviously isn't responsible. They don't care about us. I'm going to work for Starbucks. Those baristas, they have benefits. They make okay money. Like, it's got to be better than working here. And I had been a Starbucks customer for a long time, a gold card carrying member. And I felt like it was a liberal company. Their values, like, they had been pro LGBT, they had been pro like minorities. And that's something that I found important. And I thought, if I worked at this company, I would have protections, I would have better benefits and better working conditions. So when I first joined Starbucks, they had gone on a hiring spree. And when I showed up for my first shift to be trained, my store was closed. They had closed it down for a week to train a bunch of new people who were coming in for this district. And at the time I thought, like, man, that's great. Uninterrupted training with a whole bunch of other new people. I don't have to worry about anything. Which in retrospect, especially with what was coming, my coworkers probably didn't feel the same, because they had to then work at other locations besides their home store, which was more difficult to, or some of their benefits that Starbucks provides weren't eligible at that new store. So it was definitely more stressful for workers. When the store did reopen up, had it closed down for training, we were probably open. Our current store manager asking everybody at night that we close, and it might be months until we reopen. Being transferred to the highest volume store in our district, and it was really brutal. I definitely wasn't prepared for it as a new person, but the coworkers there made it worth sticking around. They were super nice and friendly, and they definitely lived up to Starbucks' mission and values. They were definitely supportive and there to help, and never made me feel like bad for if I wasn't as fast as somebody else. And I really started getting into partner. I would say that we were closed for probably like 4 or more months until my home store reopened. During that time, I had when I was at this previous store, I was like scrolling on Reddit, and a post regarding Buffalo came up, and it was talking about how Buffalo had filed to unionize, and I was like, whoa, that's super cool. I mean, my family's from a unionized store. I hope I get to be, I mean, my family's from a union. I hope that I get to be from a union. But I didn't want to organize anything. I just wanted to like sign a card and be in a union. As we came into our new store, we had a new store manager, and she was an external hire. And it kind of showed. She definitely didn't get like the Starbucks culture. She definitely wasn't like understanding where we're coming from, and she didn't understand like being a barista. And I think that a lot of the people who were like longtime baristas at Starbucks didn't understand like how she could get this job when we had a great store manager and they had sent her somewhere else. And so like people started talking about like unionizing, like they had just closed down our store, sent us wherever they wanted to send us without us like giving any input. And it was like the second time during COVID that they did that. People were kind of getting fed up with it. And our new store manager wasn't like cutting it. She wasn't being like also a barista. She was just being a manager. And I think that that definitely made it or created some tension between management and the baristas. I have so one of the things that like you kept hearing in the conversations between us was that like, yes, we should unionize, but nobody wanted to be unionizing, and we definitely agreed like none of us wanted to do it. We couldn't figure out who to push to make the person who unionizes the store. But then in the spring we had a, I would say, customer come in, and I remember that he was like a probably around my height, dark man, white hair. And I remember asking his name for his drink, and he's like, my name is Derek, but it's spelled the cool way with 2 E's. And that made me chuckle. So it was something that I wouldn't have ever like thought too much about until I left my shift that day. And he had stopped and approached me as I was walking out the door, and he was trying to hand me a flyer. And as soon as I saw the Starbucks Workers United logo, I was like, are we signing cards? Because I'm ready to sign a card right now. He chuckled a bit because that's not how it worked. And I didn't understand that wasn't how it worked. But he was asking who could I get him to help get the ball rolling in our store. So I told him to take one of these flyers and like go into the store. Our manager's not there. Hand it to the girl with the curly red hair named Celeste. And he did. And Celeste, my coworker, she was like, I have been waiting for you. Unfortunately, from there, like I had texted him once. I was like, I don't want to do the union thing. I'll see if I can find somebody to do it for you. And it used to just be me and Celeste. We would both open the Starbucks almost every weekday together, and it'd be us back and forth like, no, you have to text him. No, you have to text him. I'm not going to text him. You got to text him. We have to unionize. One of us has to text him, and it's not going to be me. So definitely if I wasn't bothering her to try to get her to text the staffer, I was trying to get any other shift supervisor or barista who would listen to me to contact the shift supervisor, to contact the staffer. That way we can start unionizing. Little did I know at the time, we had just gotten a new transfer from another store who had contacted Workers United himself. And because he did closing shifts and I did opening shifts, our paths rarely ever crossed. I remember the first time we worked together, we were complaining about how poorly scheduled these hours were and how limited staffing there was and how difficult it was just to get our daily operations done, and how I was like, it would be great if we unionized. And he was like, oh, I'm already trying to unionize. I've already contacted the staffers. So from there, like, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Great job. And he's like, yeah, you should definitely hop on a Zoom call and just listen to what they have to say. You don't have to do anything. And of course, I'm like, okay, I don't want to do any unionizing, but I guess I can hop on a Zoom call with you guys. So I did. And we started talking, and they started talking about all the people in our store and who do we think would be pro or anti-union. And it was all mostly pro-union. At the time, I think we maybe only thought 2 people would be anti-union, which is pretty good. I mean, we only had like 14 people. That's 12 people who are pro. So I ended up at the public library about a block away from the house, meeting Derek once again for the second time. And that was him dropping off cards. He showed me the little cards. He said, you have to have them sign all of this. And then like, once you get as much cards as you need, you can return it back and we'll file. So the public library kind of ended up being like our home base for getting people to sign cards, because it was so close to work. You can be out of the public view, and you didn't have to worry about management accidentally walking in on us and seeing us try to sign cards. So we would text like other baristas. We'd look at the schedule, see like who's leaving before somebody comes into a certain shift. And between me, James, and Celeste, we were able to get maybe about 10 out of the 14 people we might have had at the time to sign cards. And like, the turnaround was pretty quick from when we dropped the cards to when we actually got them back to Workers United. I would say maybe about 2 weeks at most. And by that time, we had we gave it to them on a Friday, and I think they were able to file it on a Monday. And then our store manager would have gotten that email on a Tuesday, and she was completely blindsided, which was kind of good for us, because then we didn't have to worry about like the union investing up until we had already filed. And definitely like the social media helped, like being able to like text each other outside of work, or using like messaging services like WhatsApp to create like big group chats. We were able to organize without management ever finding out until they heard from the labor board. So I would say probably by the next day, we started getting pulled aside for one-on-one meetings. So usually what would happen is somebody would get pulled aside for a one-on-one meeting, and then they would be like, hey, our store manager said this, like messaging us in the group chat. Our store manager said that we're gonna have to pay $300 a month in dues. Is that right? That seems like a lot. And of course, like, they never tell you, or they really embellish what you actually would have to do. Like $300 a month in dues doesn't really make sense at the end of the day. Like, why would, we're looking at maybe like $11 in dues, and or $5 in dues were like the estimates. So definitely like a lot of things like that, like telling partners that they wouldn't be able to transfer to other stores, telling partners that they wouldn't be able to have promotions, telling partners that like they would lose their health insurance. Definitely like the kind of things that you see Starbucks getting in trouble for, like in the news. So you're hearing similar conversations at our store for that. There was also a very long, very time-consuming 1.5 hour video that we were required to watch with Howard Schultz, kind of ensuring us that like he was a partner just like us, which kind of felt a little tone deaf, especially because I think at the time there was like reports of him having like a 12-bedroom yacht. So it's kind of like we had watched that video. then you would like come out from watching that video and then you'd be like, did you hear about his new yacht? So that definitely like did more to maybe sway partners away from Starbucks than actually do any real union busting. Now, at this point, we had filed, and there's definitely like a little bit of chatter around Montclair. And I was still like, I'm not leading this union. I can I can help you out, but I don't want to be the person who's leading the union. So James, the guy who had contacted Workers United on himself, had asked for help because he was getting a little overwhelmed with like news outlets and people from organizations like contacting him. And I was like, look, I'll make an email address, I'll screen your messages, and then I can just send you anything that sounds like it's actually a good thing. That somehow ended up me being interviewed by New Jersey Spotlight. And again, like at the time I was like, okay, I will try to do my best. I've never spoken publicly. I've never given an interview. I've never been on television or the news. But we were kind of super lucky because the gentleman who interviewed us was very, very kind and very, very like, he asked like questions that were like the right kind of questions. So it definitely made me more comfortable. But at this time, like we are also having issues with like morale at the store. Like a lot of people were feeling pressure from the company. So something that you see nationally on this campaign a lot is something called a solidarity sip-in, which is basically when somebody or a group of people who are in support of the union come into the store and they'll order coffee under like Go Union or Union Strong, and they'll like leave little notes of encouragement on our community board. And our staffer had suggested this for our store, like that it might help with morale before the upcoming vote. So I had just gotten promoted and I did that interview and I already was like feeling like I don't want to be any more visible, but I can help, definitely. I had looked at who was on the schedule. I had looked at our projected sales and I said, okay, if we have a group of people kind of slowly come in from this hour to this hour, we could definitely facilitate that. And I think it'd be really good for the morale in the store regarding the unions. Unfortunately, so the day comes and it's about 10:30 in the morning on a Monday, which is a slow time for us, but we are usually staffed because it's the middle of the day. And there's like union supporters there, and I've decided like we'll send people in 2 at a time. We'll start with me and James. That way we can call it off if it gets too hectic, or if the baristas aren't having it, we can read the room and be like, let's finish up. And I go inside with James. We go up to the register. I order a coffee, and then the next group of people come in, and my store manager, who is ringing at the register at the time, immediately runs off the floor into the bathroom and locks herself in the bathroom. And overall, like it went pretty smoothly. Like a lot of people were like really happy to see all these people who had supported them, that they had made a decision and the community had came and said like, hey, we see what you're trying to do and we support you. And unfortunately, the next day I heard from another barista that my store manager was like telling her in the back, like, how could Niah betray me like this? Which kind of was surprising to me because I thought we were in like good rapport. I didn't think that I was betraying her. I was somebody who had tried to reassure her since she found out that we filed, that like, look, the stuff that we're like complaining about is stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with you specifically. Like, you can't approve more labor for the floor. You can't approve like higher wages than what we already have. it's not a you problem. It's kind of just like a Starbucks problem. And she had, after like having more conversations with her, she sort of agreed that she might have overreacted in her own way. But she didn't take it so personally towards the end, which she has like later have taken it more personally, but I had thought at the time that maybe I had helped ease her nerves. Pretty soon after that labor sip-in, we started receiving our ballots. And me, James, and Celeste made a list of everybody in our store. And we had tried to contact partners and ask partners like, hey, did you receive your ballot? Have you mailed your ballot in? Just trying to follow up with partners to make sure that they do vote. We sent out like little messages on WhatsApp with like similar to like when you're actually voting, where it shows you like fill in the bubble all the way, close your envelope, sign on top of the envelope, mail it in. And afterwards, it was the last day to like postmark the ballot. We all celebrated at a bar that was maybe 2 blocks away. And we were just like ready to get the results. We all had voted, most of us had voted, and we just wanted to see what happened. So the day of the ballot count comes around, and Celeste, who I used to bother to try to do something to lead the union, somehow got involved and ended up at the National Labor Relations Board office in Newark to observe the ballot, which we did win anonymously, 7-0. We had expected more votes overall, especially with the people in our store, but conversations afterwards, you find out I had maybe like 3 baristas who are just like, oh, I forgot to mail it in, so I never mailed it in. But then unfortunately, I had 2 baristas who told me that our store manager told them to wait until the week of the ballot count to try to contact the office in order to get a replacement for neither barista. I mean, either way, the numbers for the ballot that we got was a majority of the store. So even if everybody voted no who didn't have a ballot, voted no, we would have won either way. Soon my coworkers, though, afterwards started like asking me questions regarding like their rights, because there's definitely a lot of pushback, like a lot of random enforcement of policies, things like that. And the new school year the new semester had started, and a lot of our workers are students, they're college students. So they needed availability change it, and she had denied everybody's change in availability. Now, my coworker James may have emailed our store manager saying that, in probably nicer terms, that it was kind of stupid to deny everybody's availability change when you've had months notice that, and you already know who are students at your store, which then ended up with our store manager and district manager taking him aside for a meeting, and my first time being a Weingarten representative. If I knew what I knew now, I probably would have done a bit better, but in the end, I think almost everybody's availability was accepted, and then maybe one person's availability was accepted with some tweaks. And I mean, I'll take any win that I can. It was definitely something that showed that, like, now that we're kind of unified together and we're able to represent each other, that like we can push back and actually have like more of a say in our workplace. And I think that really resonated with a lot of people, and it really was like a moment, like an aha moment, especially for people who maybe were kind of iffy, like they had understand that we unionized, but they didn't really know if it actually did anything. It definitely allowed them to like feel like, hey, we actually did something. So around this time too, we started contacting, getting in contact with partners both within New Jersey and nationally. And we heard about this thing called the Red Cup Rebellion. Now, for the uninitiated, Starbucks has something called Red Cup Day, and it's sort of like the Black Friday of Starbucks. It's like usually the drink launch for the holiday drinks. You would get a free red cup if you were like the first 100 people to order the drink. And so it's usually a rough day to work. The wait times are long, like you're sometimes like an hour for like a cup of coffee. And people get like really upset. There's definitely confrontational customers, especially if they get to the store after all the cups are given out. So I was like, I think I would actually rather walk around in a circle outside in the cold than work on Red Cup Day. So we could definitely try. I can see what I can do to help you strike, to help start the strike. So we pulled all of our coworkers, and we got like 75% of the coworkers said that they would strike with us. So I was like, that's a pretty good number. Like they couldn't open the store with 75% of the workers like unavailable. So I was like, dang, I guess we have to actually set up the strike now. So I started contacting like anyone I could. I started asking the first store that was unionized in New Jersey, the Hopewell location, like the barista there. I was like, hey, who do you contact when you guys went on strike? So we got in contact with the DSA. I had people reach out to me, or who had reached out to me previously, like Greg Parsons, who's a Montclair local. He definitely helped out with a lot of people, and then people from other unions. We had people from the CWA, the New Jersey Educators Association, obviously like SEIU, IBEW. There was like so many alphabet numbers that I could not even list them all. But it was kind of getting like everyone was contacting me and I was contacting everyone. And there was people who were like, hey, I can help marshaling, which is like kind of like making sure that like the strike line moves and nobody's like in somewhere they shouldn't be. Or I could help give out like pamphlets to customers, or I could bring like hot coffee for the picket line. I can bring in hand warmers. So I closed the store. I was the closing shift supervisor the day before. And as I'm like sweeping up the cafe and getting ready to put the chairs up, a gentleman comes up to me and he's like, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm with the Solidarity Singers. We're going to be there at 10 a.m. for your strike. And I'm just like, who are the Solidarity Singers? But okay, yeah, sure, come. I would love to have you guys over. So like, it was amazing, like the amount of people who just wanted to come and join us. So early in the morning at about 5:28, I sent an email to my store and district manager saying, hey, we're going to be on strike. We had decided to start the picket line at 7, and I had headed out early to kind of like help direct people where to like go or where to place things. And of course, I thought it would just be really fun to wear a floor-length green gown as a little like homage to the Starbucks siren. So I would need a little bit more time walking to the store than usual. I get there and the lights are on, and I'm peeping inside the cafe, and it's managers from all other Starbucks locations, managers from the second Starbucks location that I worked at when our store was closed, and then from the third Starbucks location where I had when we were closed for those months, And our district manager was there, our regional manager was there. It was more people than they would ever be able to contact if somebody had called out sick and they would just let the store close. So there I am, standing
Niah,
outside.
loving
Yeah.
this. If you could wrap it up in a couple of minutes because we've got two other wonderful speakers, but I'm really enjoying this.
Sure, thank you, I'm almost done. There I am, and I'm like, shoot, like nobody's here yet, and our store is open. As 8 o'clock rolls around, we are finding that like more and more people are joining the strike line, and like it's so many people that I was like not prepared. And it was definitely something that made me extremely proud to see like my baristas there with me chanting, and I felt so incredibly proud that I was able to like help them be heard and be seen while they were trying to like fight for a dignified workplace and fight for the rights that they have.
Wonderful, thank you. This has been fascinating. I have to tell you, it's like a law school exam. A bunch of the things that I heard. So this is great. Christina?
Yes, thank you, Niah, for sharing your story with us. It's very inspirational, of course, to hear, and helps very much lead into what I was going to say. I wanted to give you a brief background on the campaign. I wanted to give you my sense of why I think that this campaign is noteworthy, which will sound familiar, having heard from Niah, and kind of a touch on some of the legal issues that we have confronted as the union in this campaign. So first, just so folks, because folks might not know, Montclair is one of 400 stores that have filed representation petitions in this campaign. Of those that have gone to election, some are still pending, of course, more than 83% have voted in favor of the union. The statistics that I saw on, I believe on the NLRB website, were that the general 2022 win rate was 77%, which is a high unto itself, and a sign of our times as to how, not just simply how many representation petitions are being filed, but how many of those are being won by the unions that are mostly behind filing those. So 83% compared to the 77% average. And this trend of increased petitions is actually coming off of a drop. We're back up to where we were in 2015 levels. So, and I think that with 2022, and so I think that remains to be seen, 2023, maybe even more than that. So why the Starbucks campaign is noteworthy. As you've heard from Niah, I mean, this is an example of true organic organizing in a sector, as Dave pointed out before, that's notoriously difficult to organize. My review of the statistics suggested from BLS data that it's 4% unionization in the food service and food prep industries compared to 6% in the private sector overall. I think one of the factors that's driven this campaign, unsurprisingly, is who works for Starbucks. It is a relatively young workforce, which will not surprise anyone. It is a Gen Z workforce, and Gen Z and millennials have been reported to have more favorable attitudes towards unionization than some of the generations, even in that generation immediately above them. There's a synergy that's also been able to be garnered from the news attention that this campaign has generated. So as Niah said, the news media was reaching out to him to speak to him even before he put himself out there to be spoken to, it sounds like, if that's correct. And that is a function of how much attention this campaign has gotten. And the more attention that the campaign has gotten, the more that workers at other stores have decided to organize. and they have seen what's happened. They're very much aware of it. They follow it on social media. And social media unto itself provides a very democratic way for people to access information and to spread information. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of more organizing activity that is driven in some part by social media, or at least getting information through social media about organizing. Not simply using social media to spread a message about an existing campaign. Another thing that I think is unique about this campaign, or at least as part of why this campaign has taken off in the way it has, is about who the employer is. And Niah touched on this. Niah said, well, I was interested in working for this company because it was a liberal company that had taken a more progressive stance vis-a-vis LGBT issues, vis-a-vis racial justice issues. And I think that what a lot of the workers have experienced is a mismatch between the company's marketing message on these issues and the treatment that they've experienced. And as a result of that, I think they have reacted to say, hey, wait a minute, this disjuncture is stark and we don't like it. Some of you may have seen an article that came out this past week in Lever News, which is about the management bar at the National Restaurant Association, talking about how to respond to the unionization campaigns in the industry. And one of the things that that was said in this article is that the NRA folks were talking about using sort of a social justice message to the workforce, and trying to kind of preempt in a way some of the workers' concerns through a message that they hope they could channel some of those concerns into. And I guess what I would say to that is beware, because the more workers might hear you talk about a social media message, justice message, the more they might say, hey, wait a second, where's our social justice? Where's our worker justice? Where's our economic justice here in our workplace? The last thing that I think is really noteworthy about this campaign is the risks that workers have been willing to take. As Niah said, 75% of his coworkers signed up to go on strike. I think for a lot of us who've been working in this field, at least over the course of the time that I've been working in this field, strikes have not been very common. And so we're seeing a lot more direct action. We're seeing a lot more people willing to stand up and to step out in this campaign in a way that, frankly, I think the attorneys have had to respond to and say, oh, wait a minute, we'll catch up with you. The workers are really leading that charge. Of course, just because the workers are strong doesn't mean that the company has immediately said, fine, we'll come to the table and we'll resolve all these issues, and let's start negotiating contracts and all of the things that could have happened. And there has been a significant opposition, and that opposition has played out, both on the ground and also in the NLRB arena. So just some of the legal issues for the lawyers who are here tonight that we've had to deal with have been, I think, also ones that have required us to dust off the books because some of these issues have not presented themselves in a long time. So for instance, one of the first kind of domains of litigation that we dealt with the petitions was that the union sought individual stores and to represent store by store units. And the company challenged the single store unit and sought district-wide units. The districts being a Starbucks demarcation of stores in a particular geographic area. It's not a reference to any particular county line or state line or anything like that. And there were months of litigation spent in many of the initial cases on this particular issue. which of course eventually went up to the board, and the board rejected Starbucks' challenge to the single store unit. But that, obviously took time. And during that time, there was a lot of slow, it took us a long time to get to decisions and directions of elections, and many of which were the company sought review of. Eventually, that issue was essentially tamped down by the board's decision, which then we moved on to the next issue, which was a mail manual issue, as Niah mentions, the method of election that is. As Niah mentioned, mail ballot was how it was conducted in Montclair. The mail ballot was how many of the initial ballots were conducted. It was obviously in a time when people had a lot more trepidation about COVID, when the pandemic was a little younger than it is today, and mail was seen as a safer alternative for the conduct of the elections. But the company really challenged that and really wanted to seek manual elections. And so there was a lot of delay caused by that back and forth. It's not, as many of you probably know, a true hearing issue, but raising that issue or not sticking to an election, a stipulated election agreement, and instead presenting your position on that issue leads to the RDs still having to issue a direction of election, which in an understaffed board took time, unsurprisingly. So eventually, we've reached a rhythm where there is generally stipulations are reached to manual elections, and now we're 400 deep in those elections. The other notable legal event of this campaign has been the significant allegations of ULP conduct that have been made. So to date, there are 68 complaints by the campaign's count. That includes over 1,000 discrete alleged violations of the act. And some of these allegations include closing of recently unionized locations, the holding of captive audience meetings. Some of you may be familiar with Jennifer Abruzzo's guidance or memorandum seeking to hold a tougher line on captive audience meetings. So we're part of the new, part of the complaints that are being issued under that guidance that are then going to be reviewed by the board, presumably. Solicitation of grievances, the threat of a loss of benefits or not receiving new benefits, the granting of benefits, and in particular, a notable example is that the company offered a wage increase and other benefit improvements only to non-union stores. So stores that had neither unionized nor were in the process, nor had a petition filing, so were in the process of unionizing. The company said, well, you will get these specific wage increases, and the non-union stores will not get those the union stores will not get those wage increases. There were handbook violations. We challenged various provisions of the handbook. And so those allegations are still being heard. And then of course, what you have heard from Dave Leach before, which is that there was unsurprisingly a lot of terminations, stricter enforcement of disciplinary policies or policies that could lead to discipline, which we've alleged were unlawful. In one very high profile case, we had 7 workers reinstated in Memphis through Section 10J litigation in federal court. There are currently, or there have been now 5 Section 10J cases all over the country. And for those of you who don't practice in this area, Section 10J is a provision of the National Labor Relations Act that allows the the general counsel of the NLRB to go to federal court to seek temporary injunctive relief to basically restore the status quo and ensure that the board will be able to effectuate a full remedy despite the passage of time while the case proceeds in front of the ALJ and proceeds to decision and or proceeds up to the board in that process. Those cases just has also been probably is been publicized. Those cases have involved litigation over third-party subpoenas, which has generated plenty of work on the side. And the only other thing I wanted to touch on about the legal issues here is that because of this, the sheer volume of complaints, we've been able to seek and have the board seek on our behalf, request and have the board seek on our behalf in these proceedings, many of the novel remedies that Jennifer Brito said she wanted the regions to seek. That includes notice remedies, notice reading remedies, executives reading the remedy requested relief being that the executives read the notice posting into a video, the video is disseminated, mandatory training, and bargaining orders, which I guess bargaining orders are something also that many of you will probably also recognize had to be dusted off for this, this campaign. So those are some of the issues. I welcome any questions, but I wanted to move along to Jennifer so that we have time to hear from everyone.
Great. Thanks very much, Christina.
Sure.
Jen, it's all yours.
So hi, full disclosure, we're not involved in any of the campaigns going on at Starbucks, but just kind of listening to Niah talk and listening to Christina talk, I just want to highlight a few things from the management perspective that all of this is reminding us of or bringing us to the forefront. And I think in some ways what we're seeing isn't a huge change, right? In some ways, what Niah said earlier is exactly why you see unions come into a workforce, bad management. We just heard, I didn't like the manage. There were changes in my store locations. I didn't feel part of a team. There's all this pressure to perform. Management, pay attention is kind of the lesson. If I had to give you the lesson, management should be paying attention. Second piece of it is we do have a disadvantage as management because of tech. You heard the reference to Reddit, you heard the reference to WhatsApp, you heard the elements of surprise that was the union wanted for its store, or the members wanted for its store. And management used to be able to see the discussions, the whispers, the pulling everybody off to the side, the conversations. You see a new increase in tech. And the other piece of tech that I think we haven't touched upon today is just how far reaching it is. If you hop onto Reddit and you read anti-work, or you hop onto Reddit and you look about the union campaigns, whether it's at Starbucks or any place, it's, hey, I've been through this, let me help you. So there is an army fighting behind the scenes through technology that management isn't necessarily seeing or knowing about unless and until it's on their doorstep. And then the other piece is we're still seeing that human touch. I was down in Princeton today, I passed through, and there was some sort of labor dispute going on. I have no idea who it was. I have no idea what the background was for it, but you know what I saw in bright red? Labor dispute. And it catches your eye because that's what you can read as you're driving down the road. So you've got this balance that management is up against of super secret discussions that are happening through technology and WhatsApp and text messages, and then the in-your-face campaigns that we're all used to, and the things that you are seeing on the day-to-day. Christina said it, and I think I agree with her from a different perspective, though. Christina said it's a younger workforce that's behind all of this. I think there is a little bit of in some ways, a little bit of idealism that we don't see from some of my generation, or maybe some of the millennials who are aging out of that, or whatever generation it is. The expectation is that a company meets the ideals. And for management, that's a moving target. Today it's one thing, tomorrow it's the next thing. And that makes it more challenging for us to rely on our old tools, our old tool books, and all of those kits that we've done. And what we've also seen is a lack, and Christina, you said it very well, people are willing to take a gamble now that they weren't. Management is up against a workforce now that has said, hey, we just got you through this pandemic. You told us we were all essential. And then you said, you were so essential, we're going to pay you minimum wage. And when you put that perfect storm together, you have a very angry, loud, vocal workforce who is capable of communicating in a very different way up against the old ways of management. So management needs to brush off its toolbox, right? We need to remember our communications. We need to be paying attention. We need to be remembering kind of the process that happens. Look, unionization may come on your doorstep. There are ways to approach it that are appropriate. There are ways that aren't. And understanding that as management, we see a board that has a very aggressive agenda. We see a timeline, and we are seeing a focus on organizing efforts that I think is been quick, but even understaffed and kind of underfunded, we are still seeing this take priority, which should be assigned to all of us management folks like, hey, wait, this is important. You need to pay attention because it's going to come at you fast. We have seen, at least where the industries that I've been in, we're seeing timelines held, notwithstanding the shortness of staff. The idea of getting, extensions, the idea of begging for more time, you probably need your spleen to fall out these days to get an extension on a brief. We do see the hiccups that come out of that, though, where you've got this expectation that, for example, I just had a campaign, I had an objections hearing. It got delayed. We found out it was being delayed at like 3 o'clock the day before, that it was being moved the next day. And then there was a series of issues that fell out because of that. The hearing officer couldn't get on. There wasn't a court reporter. We delayed the next day. And thankfully it was remote and we were able to move, but you are seeing the competing problem of a priority, gathering all the parties together, and then limitations on when you are understaffed and underfunded. So from the management folks out there, I think where I would really say we need to do better is to pay attention more. And recognize that things have changed and figure out how to make it work within this changing dynamic. But I will stop there because I see the time and I do know you want to open it to questions.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much, Jen. Before I open this to questions, and please keep in mind that Christina does represent a client here, so there are some questions she's not going to be able to answer because of confidentiality. So, but Dean, do you want to check there?
Sure.
Were there questions on the chat line and see if we can?
You know what? I
Those
did not
first?
see any, but I've got a couple. And first of all,
Let's
before, yeah,
let's go to the participants to see if anyone has a question. So please direct your question to who you'd like. It's either Christina, Niah, or Jen. Anyone questions? Do I see any
hands,
hands
or
raised?
if you don't want to type, any hands out there?
I have a question. I'm on my phone, so I can't, I'm having trouble finding my hand. So I'll raise my actual hand. It's Brady Connaughton.
Hey, Brady.
Hey, Brady.
My question is, I guess for Christina and Niah. Niah, you talked about how you were approached by Derek with 2 E's. To your knowledge, I'm sure at this point you've spoken to other folks that work at Starbucks across probably the state, maybe across the nation. Is the organizing effort starting at the stores themselves, or as maybe was in your case, is it coming from the labor movement itself? And how is that working? Not only, I know you talked about it at your store, but at other stores, say in New Jersey, if you guys know.
Yeah, so like I do speak with other stores. I feel like mostly like when I was contacted by Derek, right, it kind of led nowhere. It ended up being another coworker of mine who had reached out to them instead, who was actually able to get the ball rolling. So I feel like at least again, like, and from conversations that I've had with other stores, it's less like when we are being approached by these people, and it's more like when that one person is like, okay, something's got to give, and they kind of go out and do it themselves. It does feel more organic, I would say, because like we were already having those conversations. We just didn't know somebody had already tried to contact Workers United. I'm sorry, go on.
You're on mute.
No, that's a great,
Sorry,
that's a great
sorry.
response. Brady,
I
go
guess
ahead.
I guess my follow-up question is really, well, so it sounds like it is a more organic process within your store. Is there a greater forum, kind of along the times of what Jen was talking about, where across different locations, people are asking, you know, can you help me? We're looking to organize, or the employees in our store don't know how this process goes, and maybe we want to learn more about it. Is the movement kind of growing in that kind of a way also?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I would say that barista to barista is definitely, that's where you see like more things happening. Like, you definitely hear like somebody gets borrowed to another store to cover a shift, and either they get borrowed to a unionized store, or there's a unionized partner who goes to an ununionized store, and they start having conversations, and from there they're kind of like, okay, what can I do next?
Okay.
Great.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
From Jim Cooney, we have a question.
Right.
Oh, I just lost it. Do you have it?
Yeah, the question is, to Christina and Niah, have you seen many workers terminated for participating in organizing or other types of retaliation?
Yeah, so there's generally been a decent number of allegedly unlawful terminations. The litigation, I didn't mention this before, but almost all of these board charges are in progress. We have very few actual decisions from ALJs at this point. For instance, I mentioned that there's the 10J case in Memphis that involved 7 terminated workers being reinstated on an interim basis and pending the underlying the resolution of the underlying case and adjudication of the underlying case, but that district court found there was reasonable cause for reinstatement and that it was proper to reinstate. I don't know what the official numbers are, but I know the campaign does track numbers of workers that we have reason to believe were terminated, and it is in the dozens and dozens. I am personally handling a 10J case that involves allegedly retaliatory termination.
Excellent. Let me let me ask you this. What I think is fascinating, and it's been about 10 years since I was involved in a board proceeding. I've been neutral that long, is really the expansion of remedies under this new general counsel. And I heard you talk about mandatory training, which frankly I've never seen before. I'm wondering, between that, have there been any front pay types of issues, any access issues, or in other words, if you could discuss the remedies a little bit more?
Yeah, I'm trying to, let me take one step back, which is to say that obviously there are, as I mentioned before, and some people wouldn't know, there are many cases, they're happening all over the country. There's 400 petitions.
Wow.
Fortunately, I'm not handling and have not handled all 400 of them, because I would not be here be able to talk to you right now if that had been the case. So there's an army of lawyers around the country that are doing this work, and we're disseminating information to one another. So some of what I know about the campaign is not stuff that I've seen personally in the cases that I'm directly handling, but has happened. So I'm speaking a little bit secondhand, but in terms of you just touched on 2 remedies that we saw. So the mandatory training, I believe, was about training on the principles that the board is seeking. I don't think it's been awarded yet, but in case it's been training on the sort of the basic principles of the NLRA. Front pay, we have not. I don't know of any particular cases that have been involved a front pay award. However, I will say that the general counsel also issued guidance on consequential damages, or what we ordinarily refer to as consequential damages, and at least in the non-NLRA context, and she's say basically any damages that are foreseeable on account of a worker's termination, such as medical bills that they might experience because they know they lost their medical coverage or employer-sponsored medical coverage, et cetera. Those are damages that we are willing and desire to seek on behalf of workers whose cases that we're taking on. That's just one example, but that's the idea with the broad remedial relief there in dollars and cents. And then you touched on one other remedial issue in your question, Dean, and I can you describe it?
Access.
Oh, access, yeah. So union access, I believe that has been, that's relief that's being sought in some of the complaints as well, like basically dedicated time slots for union access.
Excellent. Jen, anything you want to add there? It's really fascinating. I have no idea how this mandatory training looks. It's intriguing because I've never seen it before.
I mean, I haven't experienced any of the mandatory trainings coming. But I mean, from a management perspective, I would think that one of the good tools we should be doing is making sure our folks know what they can and can't say going into one of these campaigns or as these campaigns are going. You may always have folks who are running rogue, but belated training, I'm not so sure it gets to where the board's trying to go, but I understand in theory why it wants that. I'd be very curious though, Christina, have you seen anybody have to read a notice yet? Sorry, I just totally put you on the spot. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I was actually trying to, while we were talking, I just wanted to check to see exactly how it was phrased in one of the cases that I was working on and the petition, but I haven't gotten there yet in my request. So in the notice reading remedies, I don't believe that any of them have been awarded yet in the cases that have been resolved. So the number of cases that have actually been resolved of these 68 complaints is 5. So I don't believe that any of those involve notice reading remedies. And we, frankly, I would expect, that to be a subject of challenge for exceptions, were they to be awarded by the ALJs. And I think that's probably going to go up before the board, probably on an 8C basis for speech, employer speech. I could see that happening. I would, but I did want to, while you're talking, I did want to try to find the petition and just see one of the recent petition and just see how it was phrased in there. But I'll come back to it if I can find it.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions for any of our panelists? No? All right. Well, Niah, as I mentioned to you when we spoke last week, having Googled you, you've been a very busy person who has been touching on a lot of things. And what I was most impressed with was that you have started to raise money for a strike fund. Would you care to speak about that and what you're doing and how, if there's anyone who wants to contribute, they would find it?
Sure. So there's 2 strike funds. There's a national one, because basically, like, it's a lot to ask to go on a strike. Like, you don't get compensated for it. But unfortunately enough, we've had so many donations, like, nationally, that they're able to compensate about 70% of our expected wages, which is nice, but there's also that other 30%. So what we've done locally at my store is that we've asked for help funding the other 30% that these baristas end up missing by going on the strike line. So we've been extremely fortunate that we've definitely had help. We did it we still have it up via GoFundMe, and that helps supplement any missing wages that we have. And it also helps with materials and things like logistics and getting like our strikes going. And I think that's the only reason why we were able to do the Red Cup Rebellion strike, and then the 3-day strike, the Double Down strike, was because we were able to ask people through GoFundMe.
How has been the response to that? How has been the response of the public to helping you?
Surprisingly positive. Like, a lot of people, they will order a coffee online and then they'll come and they'll see we're on strike and they're like, oh crap, I already bought a coffee, and then decide to give to the strike fund instead. So it's definitely like a way that the unknowing consumer could still help contribute and help promote us and help us.
Have you been able to help any other stores or to share with employees at other Starbucks stores how your store has gone and kind of do's and don'ts that they might know of, that they may need to know of?
It's kind of been a bit of the reverse. I think we take a lot of notes from the Hopewell store. That was the first store that unionized in Jersey. There's definitely communications that we're having with other stores in Jersey, and we hope to see some new stores soon. And we're definitely planning on taking them under our wing once that happens.
Great.
So I want to circle back briefly to what I was touching on before, just to let you know how the board requested the relief, the regional director of Region 29 requested the relief in the pending 10J case that we're handling. And it was to convene a mandatory meeting on working time to ensure the widest possible, or at a time when meetings are normally held, to ensure the widest possible audience, where during which the district court's order would be read to employees by the district manager or a responsible official in the presence of a board agent. And the electronic additionally, electronic relief that was requested was to distribute an electronic copy of a high-level employer official in the presence of a board agent, or a board agent in the presence of a high-level employer official reading the district court's order on the company's internal intranet and other apps that the company uses to communicate with employees.
Was that the company-wide or just in a specific region, or how is it divvied up?
No, company-wide. So
Oh.
such that the video can be accessed by employees at all stores in the United States and territories.
Wow, powerful.
Yeah, that's the relief that's requested. That's not, obviously it hasn't been achieved or
Okay.
ordered. But that's what was requested. I just wanted to give folks a sense of how, how broadly and how aggressively the regions are seeking remedies. These are examples that we have locally, but they're consistent with what we're seeing across the country.
Yeah, and without going too much into the weeds, that's become more prevalent. It's not unheard of. It's the consequential damages that I think is most fascinating from what I heard today. Great. Any other questions? Any comments?
Well, then I'd like to,
Okay.
well, I would like to give Niah the last word.
There
Niah,
you
what,
And I want to
having gone
close.
through this, what have you learned, and any thoughts that you have on having completed this process? Would you have done it again?
I think I would definitely do it again. If there's one thing that I've learned doing all of this work, is that you can ask for help, and you'll definitely be surprised who shows up to support you.
Well, that's
Um,
great.
Thank you.
I think those are great
Well,
words to end on.
Great words. I want to thank David and Dean. They're like the David Dean show. They are amazing when they put together something. Thank you so much. Jen, you're always with us at NJ Lera, and thank you. You really give a good insight, especially to this, on how people have to start to work together and where everyone has to come up to speed on how things have to be done. Thank you, Jen, for coming. And Christina, wonderful meeting you as well. and everything you've shared with us. The two, both Jen and Christina, have been wonderful. Niah, I have to say to you, look at all the faces. Most of us got that very first phone call that said, we just come to a meeting and you don't have to do anything. You are looking at where we are today. And you are now in that club. Now, I can't, to me, that sums it all up because we all had that phone call and here we are. So welcome. Welcome. Well, thank you, everyone. We hope to see you on March. We have hopefully that we can all stay healthy and we'll be in person at the Americana with our DEI program. So we hope to see you there. We'll be getting out the everything. Bernadette, we can't thank you enough for doing everything. And I want to wish everyone a wonderful evening. Thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Cecilia.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It was great.
Thank you.
It was great.